1917, German Field Marshal von Hindenburg is playing a longer game. Germany must absorb multiple French or British attacks until conditions change and a counterstrike can be mounted. This may take time, but the Germans calculate that another campaigning season might see Russia collapse in the east. If that happens, massive new forces will be released for a showdown in the west. To achieve this delay, during the winter of 1916, the Germans reinforced their line running 90 miles from the North Sea to Verdun. The Allies call it the Hindenburg Line. The Germans believe it is impregnable. Hindenburg hopes that the line will be so formidable it may persuade the Allies not to attack, buying him the time he needs. So Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov at Kursk in World War II and German Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg on the Western Front in World War I have different objectives in their defensive battle plans. Zhukov's is to lure the enemy in and then destroy him with an immediate counterstrike. Von Hindenburg's is simply to absorb the enemy attacks which he knows are inevitable. But to achieve this, both Zhukov and von Hindenburg must meet the next requirement in the battle plan for a defensive battle: intelligence. The battle planners need accurate intelligence, either on the enemy's intentions or at least on the methods he will use.
It's vital to know what the enemy's intentions are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, because if you have that information, you can then prepare. You can prepare not only to exploit the enemy's weaknesses, but you can also prepare to strengthen your own weaknesses dependent upon that information that you receive.
At Kursk, Zhukov doesn't simply rely on intelligence to prepare his plan for a defensive battle. He prepares that battle plan because of the intelligence he is receiving. Hitler secretly announces Operation Citadel, his plan to assault the Soviet salient, to his generals in April. Yet within days, Zhukov is so confident he knows Hitler's intentions that he is able to propose to Stalin a battle plan to turn Kursk into a defensive battle, draw in the German forces, then destroy them in a counterattack. Zhukov's confidence is based on good information. The first is the Lucy Ring, operating out of Switzerland, part of the Soviet Red Orchestra spy network of disaffected German officers. The second is selected intelligence passed to Soviet leader Joseph Stalin by Britain, whose codebreakers have cracked the German Enigma code. But the Kremlin also has a third and crucial source, which has only recently become clear.
Perhaps the most vital source of Soviet intelligence in the preparation for the Battle of Kursk was the fact that they had already broken the German Enigma code. But it actually took the West 40 years to find that out.
In France in 1917, von Hindenburg does not possess this incredible level of intelligence on British intentions. He only knows that an Allied offensive will come. Nevertheless, Hindenburg's defensive battle plan holds up well against a variety of Allied assaults. At Arras and Chemin-des-Dames in April, wave after wave of Allied troops attacked German trenches in fruitless attempts at a breakthrough. The toll on French troops is so great that the French army collapses into mutiny and cannot mount any further attacks for the rest of the year. In June, to keep German pressure off the French, the British attacked the dominant White Sheet Messines Ridge near Ypres. But since frontal attack is proving to be hopeless, they try something new. Engineers and soldiers dig tunnels under the German trenches and fill them with explosives. When the charges detonate, the infantry attack the ridge and take it with ease. But meaningful victories are rare on either side, and dreadful weather has turned the front into a quagmire. By November, the British are still struggling for the Passchendaele Ridge, only 6 miles from where they started. Politicians in London demand that Field Marshal Haig be relieved of command. Haig is desperate to engineer a victory which might save himself. Throughout 1917, Hindenburg's defensive battle plan has succeeded in its main objective, buying the Germans time. And what he hoped for on his Eastern Front has started to happen. Revolution is sweeping Russia. In March 1917, the Tsar abdicates. And during July, a final desperate Russian offensive is comprehensively beaten. By the beginning of November, it's obvious that Russia will soon be out of the war. But for the Germans to reap the rewards, the Hindenburg Line on the Western Front must continue to hold. As the approach of winter signals an end to the campaign season until the spring, von Hindenburg is unaware that Haig is planning to attack his line yet again. Von Hindenburg and his generals, however, do have another type of intelligence: intimate knowledge of the ground over which they will fight.
In the defensive battle, the defending commander has an inherent advantage where intelligence is concerned. In particular, he has the opportunity to gain intimate knowledge of the terrain over which the battle will be fought.
And von Hindenburg and his generals also have another important part of the intelligence puzzle. The German generals may not know of the British plan to launch another attack in November 1917, but they do have intelligence on one of the weapons the British might use against them: the tank. A year earlier, in the Battle of the Somme, the British had used a small number of tanks. In the months that followed, the Germans were able to plan against a tank attack.
They had, in the intervening year, developed all sorts of countermeasures, both in terms of new weapons, new shells for their field guns and trench mortars, special anti-tank rifles, in terms of techniques, and also in terms of thinking about ways of dealing with tanks, developing large-scale countermeasures.
But none of this will be of any use unless von Hindenburg, like Soviet Marshal Zhukov a quarter of a century later, can meet the next requirement in the battle plan for defensive battle. Kursk, 1943, and the Western Front, 1917. Marshals Zhukov and von Hindenburg have chosen defensive battle as their battle plan. But will their enemy allow them to meet the next critical requirement? Time. Commanders must have time to prepare their plan for a defensive battle, and to prepare and construct the positions on the ground which will become the battlefield. In France, von Hindenburg's line had been prepared over a year earlier, and its western sections had held well during the year. The section codenamed Siegfried, in front of the town of Cambrai, where Haig will launch his attack, is 5.5 miles deep. Hindenburg's forces have made excellent use of the terrain. Their defenses incorporate thick belts of barbed wire, machine gun nests, and trenches designed to stop the progress of tanks. Behind these, to conserve troops, Hindenburg has established mobile reserves to reinforce whatever point in the overall line the enemy launches an attack. At Kursk, in contrast, from the moment Marshal Zhukov is informed through his intelligence sources of Hitler's plans, it's a race against time. Here is the German plan, which Zhukov must counter. German forces will destroy the salient in a fast-moving blitzkrieg-style pincer movement. The 9th Army will attack from the north. The 4th Panzer Army will strike at the southern side. They will link up east of Kursk, cutting off all Soviet forces to the west of them. But Hitler's top generals cannot agree even on whether Operation Citadel should be launched. And critically for Zhukov, the Germans delay the operation. Hitler wants to wait for as many as possible of the new Tiger Heavy and Panther medium tanks. The new date for attack is set for July 5th. The delay gives Zhukov the vital time he needs to prepare both his defenses and his counterattack. His plan places 6 belts of defenses, stretching 110 miles back from the front line, with 2 more behind that, and a 9th along the east bank of the River Don. He orders the construction of almost 6,000 miles of trenches and anti-tank ditches. Red Army soldiers dig thousands of foxholes. When the Germans attack, they will encounter 2,400 Soviet anti-tank mines per mile, and even greater numbers of anti-personnel mines. For the battle, German Field Marshal Erich von Manstein assembles a formidable fighting force. 900,000 men, 2,700 tanks, and 2,000 aircraft. Against them, Zhukov commits 40% of the Red Army's entire infantry and armored divisions, with more than 1.3 million men, 20,000 field guns, and 3,500 tanks, supported by more than 2,650 aircraft. In reserve, he has another 500,000 men. The figures are incredible.